thoughtful woman who had always believed that marriage required patience. She and her husband, Michael, had been married for many years and had 3 daughters together. Their oldest girl was 13, the second was 10, and the youngest had just turned 8. For a long time, life had been stable in their home. Michael had been the breadwinner of the family. He worked a good job and earned enough to keep the family comfortable. Grace also had a job, but her salary mostly handled smaller needs, while Michael carried the heavier financial responsibilities. But everything changed the day Michael lost his job. At first, Grace was supportive. She comforted him and encouraged him not to give up. She assured him that her salary would help sustain the family temporarily while he searched for another job. One evening, as they sat quietly in the living room after the children had gone to bed, she gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Michael, don't worry too much," she said softly. "You'll find another job. These things happen sometimes." Michael sighed heavily and leaned back in his chair. "I just hate sitting at home like this," he muttered. Grace tried to reassure him again. "My salary can help us manage things for now," she said. "We'll get through this together." But something unexpected happened. Instead of focusing on finding a new job, Michael began insisting that Grace submit her entire salary to him every month. According to him, he is the man of the house and the one who knew how to manage the family's finances. Grace refused. Her refusal was not out of pride or rebellion. From past experience, she knew her husband had never been careful with money. While he had been earning well before, he had also been extremely extravagant. He loved impressing his friends, hosting expensive outings, and maintaining a lifestyle that often exceeded their means. Now that their financial situation had changed, Grace believed they needed to be careful. For a moment, Michael nodded. But a few days later, something began to change in his attitude. One evening, he called Grace into the living room. "Grace," he said firmly, "from next month, when your salary comes in, you should transfer it to me." Grace looked surprised. "Mike, please, I thought we have agreed on this earlier," she asked. "No, I didn't agree on anything with you," Michael replied. "I'm still the head of this house. I know how to manage the finances." Grace hesitated. "Michael," she said carefully, "I'm not saying you shouldn't manage the money, but maybe we should plan the spending together." Michael frowned. "What do you mean together?" he asked. "When I was the one earning the money, did I ever complain? I handled everything." Grace took a deep breath. "Yes, you handled it," she said quietly, "but sometimes the spending was too much." Michael sat up straight. "What are you trying to say? That I spend more carelessly?" Grace tried to explain calmly. "I just think we should be careful now," she said. "Things are different. Maybe we should reduce expenses for a while." Michael's voice suddenly became sharp. "You don't trust me with money?" "That's not what I said," Grace replied quickly, but Michael had already made up his mind. From that day forward, the tension in the house slowly began to grow. Almost every evening, the same argument returned. "Submit your salary to me," Michael would say. "And let's plan it together," Grace would respond. Sometimes the arguments became louder. "You're disrespecting me," Michael would shout. "I'm trying to protect our family," Grace would reply. One evening, Grace made a suggestion that made things even worse. "Michael," she said carefully, "maybe we should move the girls to a more affordable school for now." Michael looked at her in disbelief. "Withdraw them from their school?" he asked angrily. "Do you know what people will say?" Grace tried to reason with him. "It's only temporary," she explained, "until things improve." But Michael shook his head. "You want people to laugh at me?" he said. "My friends will mock me if my daughters go to a cheaper school." Grace looked at him quietly. "So we should go into debt just to impress your friends?" Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Enough!" he shouted. From that day on, the arguments became worse. Michael began accusing Grace of being selfish. He began with reason. He presented spreadsheets. He referenced his track record as provider, conveniently edited of its excess, focusing only on the school fees and the holidays and the ShopRite carts. He spoke about efficiency, about economies of scale, about how 2 people managing money separately is waste. "When I was the one bringing money home, I never locked it from you. Everything was open. Everything was shared." He would say this at dinner, sometimes in front of the girls, his voice carrying that particular weight of a man who believes his suffering is a debt others owe him. "I gave freely, and now look." Grace would look. She would see her daughter's eyes moving carefully between their parents, the way children learn to read weather before it breaks. She would see Ngozi, her eldest at 13, already too old for her age, already carrying something in her expression that no child should carry. She would keep her face still and say nothing. When guilt failed, he tried theology. "You are not submitting, Grace. That is the problem. A wife submits to her husband. This is the Bible. This is not my opinion." He said this with the authority of a man who had perhaps opened the Bible twice in the last decade. The church you attend, that pastor is not teaching you correctly. A properly taught wife would not behave this way. He called her disobedient, selfish, disrespectful. He said these words so many times that she began to examine herself for their truth, the way you check your face in a mirror after someone tells you there's something on it. She examined herself and found nothing. Only a woman protecting her children's future from a man who had not yet proven he could protect it himself. Then came the nights that frightened her daughters. She would not call it what it was, not even to herself, not fully. He pushed her out of the way violently and raised his hand as if to hit her. Grace stood there, her eye shut tightly, waiting for the slap. Instead, she heard a loud crash, the sound of something thrown against a wall. She stood frozen on the spot, her heart hammering. She couldn't believe this just happened. He has become physical with her. 2 days after the incident, he made another attempt to convince her. "You've changed," he told her that evening. "When I was the one bringing money, you enjoyed it." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "Michael, I'm still supporting this family," she said. "The Bible says, 'Wives, submit.' Did you hear that? Submit to your own husbands. Why can't you obey the word of God you read every day?" "Mike, please don't make it," she started. But he was not listening anymore. He angrily stormed out of the house. Then the real threat started. "If you can't submit to me," he said one night, "then maybe this marriage should end." Grace's heart sank. "Why are you bringing divorce into this?" she asked quietly. "And why not? Do you have an idea of what you are doing?" "Yes," Michael replied coldly. The emotional pressure became too much for her. One afternoon, Grace went to see the pastor of their church. She sat across from him in his office and slowly explained everything. "Pastor," she said sadly, "my husband is demanding that I give him my salary every month. When I refused, he started threatening divorce." The pastor listened carefully. "That must be very painful for you," he said gently. Grace nodded. "I don't want my marriage to break," she said. "But I'm afraid of what will happen if I hand over all the money. My husband is extravagant, Pastor. I have watched him over the years waste money. He is so reckless in spending. Pastor, can you believe that my husband does not have any savings? He blows money as soon as it enters his hands, claiming that another one will show up tomorrow." The pastor leaned forward. "Grace," he said calmly, "don't make any sudden decisions. Let's pray about it. God can still intervene." Grace nodded slowly. "I'll try to be patient," she said. "We will pray," he told her. "God is able. Keep the home, Sister Grace. Don't provoke him unnecessarily. We will pray." She prayed. She prayed alone, in the bathroom at night with the tap running so no one would hear. She prayed with her daughters in the mornings, their small hands wrapped around hers. She prayed with a fierceness that surprised even her. But she also began, quietly and without announcement, to make plans. A month later, everything exploded. It was a Friday evening in October. She had come home with her salary. An October she would later think of as the last ordinary month of her life. The girls were at the neighbors'. Michael was waiting. "So," he said, folding his arms, "your salary came in today?" Grace nodded. "Yes." "Transfer it to me, now," he said. Grace shook her head gently. "Michael, we've talked about this." "Grace, you are trying me, Grace, you are trying me," he warned. He started raking, the same speech, the same grievances, but louder now, stripped of its earlier pretense at civility. He wanted the transfer. In fact, all her savings should be transferred. Tonight. He was done asking. His voice filled the apartment the way smoke fills a room, pressing against every surface. "Mike, please, I can't do this." "Shut the hell up and stop arguing with me, you ingrate." She set down her bag. She stood in the center of the sitting room, and she listened to him shout. And something inside her, something that had been bending for months under the weight of his anger, went very, very quiet. He had not noticed yet. He was still talking. Then he went to the bedroom and came back with papers. He set them on the table with a flourish that was almost theatrical, the gesture of a man who believes he is directing a scene in which the other person does not know their lines. Divorce papers. Her name typed neatly at the top, a signature line at the bottom, waiting. "Sign it," he said, the word landing like a dare. "If you want to be stubborn, then sign it. We will end this marriage, and you will leave this house with nothing." He had rehearsed this moment. She could see that. He had imagined her crumbling, the tears, the begging, hands reaching for his feet, the surrender he had been building toward for months. He had imagined her transferring the money not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. He did not know her. Grace walked to the table. She picked up the pen. She signed her name, the same signature she had used for 13 years of marriage, steady and clear. And she set the pen down. She turned and walked to the bedroom. She opened the wardrobe. She did not rush. That was the thing he would think about later, in the long silence that followed. She had not rushed. She moved through the wardrobe with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had packed, in her mind, 100 times before this. Dresses lifted from their hangers and folded without hesitation. Shoes paired and placed in bags. Toiletries swept from the bathroom shelf. Her jewelry, some pieces gifts from him, others bought with her own money, and she knew exactly which were which, removed and wrapped carefully. She took what was hers. She left what was his. From the sitting room, he watched. He had not moved from where she left him. He was still waiting for the scene to correct itself, for her to stop and look at him with the expression he needed, the one that said, "You win." She did not look at him. When the last bag was zipped, she carried her things to the door in 2 trips. She opened it. She stepped through it. She did not look back. He stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time after she left. The wardrobe gaped open, half its contents gone, hangers swinging slightly as though disturbed by a wind that had already passed. The bedroom felt different, not empty exactly, but lighter, as if something had been holding its breath in this room for years and had finally exhaled. He called her phone. It rang out. He called again, and again. He drove to her sister's house. Her sister opened the door, took one look at his face and said, "She's not here." Whether this was true or not, he would never be certain. He went to the pastor. Pastor prayed with him and promised to reach out to Grace. The pastor called. She did not answer. He told his friends about it on Saturday, the way men sometimes turn humiliation into a story they can control. He laughed as he said it. "Women," he said, shaking his head. "She's gone to her mother's. She'll be back in a week. You know how they are." 1 week passed. He cooked for himself for the first time in over a decade and burned the rice twice. 2 weeks passed. He picked the girls up from school and they asked about Mummy, and he told them she was resting. She would be back soon. Ngozi, at 13, looked at him with eyes that were her mother's eyes, calm, measuring, patient, and said nothing. 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. No one could reach her, not the pastor, not the women from the church, not mutual friends, not even his own mother, who called Grace twice and reported back, tight-lipped, that the number was active but unanswered. She had not run. She had not hidden in shame or fear. She had simply moved on, like a river that, finding its course blocked, does not rage forever. It simply finds another way. And in the silence she left behind, understanding arrived. He understood, finally, on an evening in January. He was sitting in the sitting room, the television on but unwatched, the apartment carrying that particular quality of stillness that belongs only to homes where someone is permanently missing. His youngest had drawn a picture of their family at school, himself, Grace, the 3 girls, and her teacher had sent it home with a note. The drawing showed Grace in the center, the girls clustered around her. He was to the side, small, separate. He sat with the drawing for a long time. He thought about the wardrobe, about the way she had moved through it without hesitation, as if she had known, long before that Friday, exactly what she would take and exactly what she would leave. He thought about the signature, steady, unhurried, almost peaceful. He had given her the divorce papers as a weapon, and she had received them as a door. He had not broken her. He had freed her. The weight of this settled over him like a stone. He was not, even then, a man who found it easy to be wrong. His pride was the oldest thing in him, older than his love for her, older perhaps than any good intention he had ever held. It was the furniture in the room before she arrived, and it would be there after she was gone. He picked up his phone. He found her name in his contacts. His thumb hovered. He put the phone down. He sat in the quiet of the apartment, where 3 daughters were asleep in their rooms, where a wardrobe stood half empty in the bedroom, where a woman had once stood at a table and chosen herself, and he let the understanding move through him like a tide, complete, unstoppable, and far too late. Some men only learn the value of a woman when the space she filled becomes the loneliest room they have ever stood in. For the first time, he began to realize something painful. He had underestimated his wife. But by then, life had already begun to teach him a lesson. Without Grace's salary, managing the household became extremely difficult. School fees started piling up. Bills kept arriving. One evening, while searching through a drawer, Michael discovered a small notebook. Curious, he opened it. Inside were detailed records of every household expense Grace had managed for years. Groceries, school fees, medical bills, electricity, transportation, emergency savings. Michael stared at the pages in disbelief. "So, this is what she's been doing all these years," he whispered to himself. That night, Michael sat quietly in the living room. For the first time, he truly understood how wrong he had been. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. The first real crack in Michael's pride did not come from loneliness. It came from life itself. 3 months after Grace left, the landlord knocked. Not the polite knock tenants receive. The hard, impatient knock of a man who had already waited too long. "Mr. Michael," the landlord said, standing at the doorway with folded arms. 3 months' rent." Michael forced a smile. "You know things have been tight lately, but I'm expecting something soon." The landlord glanced past him into the house, at the quiet living room, the half-empty shelves, and the absence of the woman who used to greet him with calm respect. "You used to be a serious man," the landlord said slowly. "Used to be." Those 3 words hit harder than the rent demand. Michael closed the door and leaned against it. For the first time in his life, he felt small inside his own house. Children notice everything. They just don't always say it, until the day they do. It happened one evening while Michael was struggling in the kitchen again, trying to cook stew that tasted more like burnt pepper and regret. Ngozi stood quietly by the doorway. She had been watching him for a while. "Daddy?" He didn't turn. "Yes?" "Why did you chase Mummy away?" The spoon stopped moving. Silence fell like a dropped plate. "I didn't chase her away," he muttered. Ngozi stepped closer. "Yes, you did." Her voice was calm. Too calm for a 13-year-old. "You used to shout at her every night. You pushed her one time. I saw." His chest tightened. "Children are not supposed to witness your failures." But they had. "Daddy," she continued carefully, "when Mummy was here, the house used to feel warm." Her words landed gently, but they broke something inside him. That night, Michael sat alone in the living room long after the girls had gone to bed, and for the first time in months, he cried, not loudly, just quietly, the way men cry when they realize they may have destroyed something they cannot repair. 4 months later, Michael heard something unexpected. He was at the market buying food when an old church member recognized him. "Ah, Brother Michael," he forced a smile. "How are you? And the girls?" The woman tilted her head. "I saw your wife last week." The air left his lungs. "You saw Grace? Are you serious?" "Yes, she came to speak at a women's program that I attended." He blinked. "Speak?" The woman smiled. "She shared her story about strength and dignity. People were crying that your wife Grace has Grace O." Michael stood there stunned. Grace, speaking, in a women's program, helping others, moving on without him, while he was here, barely holding life together. The woman added softly, "You lost a good woman, my brother." Then she walked away. And Michael stood in the middle of the market feeling like the ground beneath him had shifted. The true humbling came one rainy night. His youngest daughter, Amaka, suddenly collapsed with a high fever. Michael panicked. He rushed her to the hospital, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. The nurses began asking questions. "Where's her mother?" He froze. Should he try her number again? His pride had prevented him from calling her again since that incident. He knew the number. But suddenly it felt like a wall he had built himself. Why not swallow his pride and try her number again? He paced up and down the hallway, struggling inside. What if she refuses to answer like before? He finally dialed with shaking hands. The phone rang. His heart was beating fast. It rang again, and rang. Then, for the first time in 5 months, Grace answered. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, not angry, not emotional, just calm. He swallowed hard. "Grace, it's Amaka. She's sick." There was a brief silence. Then her voice changed instantly, pure motherly urgency. "Which hospital?" Grace arrived at the hospital 30 minutes later, and when Michael saw her walk through those doors, his heart stopped. She looked different, not richer, but peaceful, not glamorous, but healthy and beautiful, calm and stronger, like someone who had survived fire and come out refined instead of burned. She walked straight to Amaka's bed and held her daughter. "Mommy is here," she whispered. The little girl smiled weakly, tears filling her eyes. "I missed you, Mummy." Michael stood in the corner feeling like a visitor in his own family. After the doctor finished examining Amaka, Grace stepped into the hallway. Michael followed. They stood facing each other for the first time in months. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "I am sorry." 3 words, simple, but heavy. Grace studied him quietly. "I know." That answer surprised him. "You know." She nodded. "You always had pride, Michael. I just didn't realize how much it would cost us." The truth in her voice hurt more than anger would have. Months passed. Michael slowly began rebuilding himself. He found work again, not the big job he once had, but honest work. He learned to cook properly. He learned to braid his daughter's hair. He learned to apologize. He learned to listen, things he had never bothered to learn before. But the deepest lesson came on the day the divorce was finalized. The judge signed the papers. Grace closed the file calmly, and as they walked out of the courthouse, Michael asked quietly, "Is there any chance we could ever be a family again?" Grace looked at him, not with bitterness, not with revenge, just with clarity. "Michael," she said gently, "a woman can forgive." He nodded. "But sometimes," she continued softly, "forgiveness doesn't mean returning." She walked away toward the waiting car where the girls sat waiting, and Michael stood on the courthouse steps watching them drive off. Understanding finally settled fully in his chest. Some lessons in life come too late to fix the past, but just in time to change the man you become. A man may send his wife packing in anger, but sometimes the emptiness it leaves behind is what finally fills him with wisdom. Moral lessons from the story. Pride can destroy a home faster than poverty. 2. Marriage is not about control, it is about partnership. 3. Financial transparency is essential in every family. 4. Respect in marriage must go both ways. 5. Sometimes stepping away is necessary for healing and reflection. 6. True strength is not domination, but humility and accountability. 7. Many quiet sacrifices in families go unnoticed until they are gone.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can be notified when we drop more interesting stories. Leave comments below. Thanks for watching.